if you are, let's say, a high net worth American family and you know somebody over in the UK who you know and trust, who ultimately is either a British citizen or has permanent residence, you can basically get them to set the company up for you, ultimately apply for a sponsor license for the company, and then bring you over on a skilled worker visa. Now, it cuts out all the issue of having to do the expansion worker and so on. It's faster. But the reality is, you've got to know and trust somebody, because that person's got to be a director or a full-time employee of your business.
Welcome to today's US-UK Tax Talk podcast. Today I'm joined by Charles Avens, head of the immigration practice here at Collie Bristow. We have a really great discussion about the different visa options into the UK and how to claim UK citizenship. We hope you enjoy the episode. Good morning, Charles. How are you?
I'm very good. Morning, Aidan. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You have the privilege, or the misfortune, of being the first video guest we've got from Collie Bristow coming onto this podcast. So thank you for making space in your diary. It was going to be a great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Same with me. So, delighted.
Marvellous. So, as I trailed already, this discussion is going to be a bit different to a tax and estate planning episode, which is the work that I do. But you, Charles, are the head of our immigration practice at Collie Bristow. And so what I thought would be really helpful is to have you on to give a bit of a primer on immigration law in the UK, how it works, particularly given the American nature of this podcast for Americans coming to the UK, but it's going to be more general than that. And so I think it will work as an introduction to anyone thinking of coming to the UK. What does the landscape of the UK visa options look like? What are some of the other options people can use? Because I appreciate it's a fast-moving environment, and there always seems to be something in the news about new avenues or avenues being taken away. And so, hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, I'm sure will be really popular.
No, absolutely. I'm delighted to do that. I mean, I think it's a pretty hot topic at the moment, immigration into the UK. So, I'm delighted to kind of see if I can add a little bit of clarity and explain a few of the routes into the UK.
Great. So, looking ahead to the listener, or the viewer, I should say, what we're going to look at is three different topics broadly. The first one is a general introduction to immigration into the UK.
Sure.
What does it all mean? Who needs a visa? Who maybe doesn't need a visa? And how prescriptive is that visa process? Most of the time we'll spend talking about the various visa options. What can people do to come to the UK? How long will those visas last for? What are the criteria? Sure. And then at the end, we'll look at, for those that are now in the UK, how can they move from being on visa status to maybe the equivalent of, say, a green card in the US and maybe eventually to citizenship here in the UK. So we'll kind of lead someone through the narrative arc of coming to the UK, and hopefully by the end of it, we're all going to feel very worldly wise on how to come here. How does that sound?
Fantastic. That sounds absolutely fantastic.
Great.
I will try and keep it relatively general because, as you imagine, it's a rather detailed area. So I hopefully I will not go into too much detail, but the reality is I'll give some people a little bit of clarity as to what routes can be taken into the UK and how they can hopefully one day achieve maybe a permanent residence or citizenship in the United Kingdom.
Any of our colleagues who are listening in, talking about keeping things brief, we'll know from you and me, Charles, speaking to each other that, shall we say, it's going to be interesting to watch us keep track of each other and keep each other brief is going to be the order of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. Definitely.
I think the obvious place to start, and it feels perhaps initially slightly counterintuitive, is in thinking about the immigration piece, is to think about UK citizenship more generally, because of course, if someone is a UK citizen, they don't need to apply for a visa. And there will be people out there who are already UK citizens, and there are people out there who may not currently be UK citizens, but might be eligible for UK citizenship. And I'm presuming that you would say, if someone is eligible for citizenship, let's go down the citizenship route from an immigration perspective, rather than the visa option. If that's the case, what do the criteria look like for British citizenship now in 2025?
Sure. I mean, the reality is that anybody who is not a British citizen or who doesn't have permanent residence in the UK, they would need a visa. We are no longer part, as you know, of the EU. And so doesn't matter which country you come from in the world, even EU nationals now, you need to have a visa to come to the UK if you're looking to effectively live here and work here permanently. Okay? So I just want to make that absolutely clear, because sometimes there's a bit of a misunderstanding. We sometimes get Europeans still thinking that, they don't need a visa, but unfortunately you do if you want to live and work.
I'm very sorry. We took that decision in 2016.
Absolutely, and that's too late now. The reality is that if you, of course, get permanent residence, you can live here and work here for the rest of your life without needing to become a British citizen. You don't have to become a British citizen if you don't want to. But there are negative side to that in the fact that if you, as a European, if you leave the UK for a period of 5 or more years and you never return to the UK in that time, then you lose your right to permanent residence and ultimately, what is called settled status from a European angle. You lose that right, and then you'd have to go back to having a visa. Now, if you're American and you have permanent residence in the United Kingdom, and you leave and you go back to the United States for 2 years, so a block of 2 years, and you never return to the UK in that 2-year period, then again you lose the right to that permanent residence, and you then have to go back to being on a visa. So my view to all clients going forward, unless there's really genuinely a reason why they shouldn't get naturalized and get British citizenship, is that really the goal is citizenship.
Because then you've got your choice. You can take as much time out of the UK as you want. You can always come back.
Correct, exactly. Why wouldn't you? The reality is Britain doesn't mind dual nationality, tri-nationality. I mean, we don't have an issue with it. And so if once you've got a British passport, you can come and go as you please forevermore, and without any issue at all. So that's the kind of gold standard.
Who can apply for British citizenship? I'm assuming it's not just I have an ancestor way, way, way back when that was a UK national. Otherwise, we'd have a lot of British citizens. How
world?
No, exactly. How recent in my past do I need to have a UK nexus to allow me to apply for UK citizenship?
The reality is that if you are a foreign national whose parent was born in the United Kingdom to a British citizen, then that your parent can pass that citizenship to you, and you are what we call your citizenship is by descent. Okay, so it's through effectively the bloodline of your parent. It's not because you were born in the UK; it was because your parent was a British citizen.
And that's important, I guess, to distinguish, say, from the Americans, where they still currently, at the time of recording, have the rule that if you're born on US soil, you are an American citizen. You don't pick up that same right these days by virtue of being born in the UK.
Yeah, that was all washed away in 1981, with effectively they stopped effectively foreign nationals being able to be born here in the UK. So if you flew in, let's say, with your parents, and your father was on business and your mother happened to give birth to you whilst you were in the UK, before 1981, of course, you were automatically British if you were born here. That was all stopped and washed away. There is no citizenship now by being born here. That doesn't work that way. Ultimately, the issue you have, though, is if you're a citizen by descent only through your parent. Okay, so you're born in, let's say, the United States of America. Your mother was British, so you get your British nationality through your mother. You then cannot pass it on to your children unless your children are born in the United Kingdom. So if you look at the ancestral visa, which can only be used by Commonwealth countries, grandparent, so it's grandparent to parent to child, so it's that you can't use great grandparent. That doesn't work. So we can go so if I'm a Canadian and ultimately, because I'm Commonwealth and my grandfather was British or my grandmother was British, then I could look at getting an ancestral visa through that. But if people sit there and say, oh, my great grandparent was, no, that's too far removed.
So it would have been the case. The Americans would have been very welcome to join the Commonwealth after they revolted in 1776, but they decided to not join the Commonwealth, unlike some former British colonies. They could have had that route in. I imagine that probably doesn't weigh too heavily on the founding fathers when they're thinking about the Commonwealth.
No, but actually, funny enough, fascinatingly, and I don't know how true this is, but fascinatingly, I have heard on the grapevine that King Charles has extended to President Trump the idea of America joining the Commonwealth, and supposedly President Trump has not said no. So watch this space, because you never know. If that were to happen and America were to join the Commonwealth, then that would be very interesting from an ancestral visa point of view. There'd be a lot of ancestral claims.
I presume that probably would include the president himself, because I think his mother was born in Scotland.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. His mother was born in Scotland, so he's shooing. There you go.
And when it comes to a citizenship application, sort of last question, I think, on this point, is it sort of a done deal? Is there any other requirement or criteria you have to hit in order to be a valid applicant for citizenship? Or is it just simply you meet the historical ancestral requirement, therefore you are simply eligible for citizenship?
If it's done through bloodline, so if it's done through your mother or father was British, then ultimately, yes, you can apply straight away to be British. And like I said, if you're a member of a Commonwealth country and your grandparent was British, then you have to go through the ancestral route, which means you have to have a visa and you have to be in the UK for 5 years and so forth. The only other way to get British citizenship, of course, is to go through, as a foreign national, of course, is go through having a visa.
Yes, that'll be the end of our discussion, I think. So you mentioned most people who want to come and live and work in the UK will need a visa. But of course, I imagine most of the visas issued by the UK government are probably tourist visas, because we have a lot of people that come here temporarily. What does a tourist visa look like? How long can you be here for on a tourist visa under the rules? And what is this new ETA that I hear of, and what do people need to do to enter the UK legally as a tourist?
One has to be very careful, because the issue with what they call the standard visitor visa, so tourist visa, we have two sets of lists. We have what we call non-visa nationals and visa nationals. Visa nationals are people who have to come from countries which you have to get a visa if you want to come to the United Kingdom. There is a list of non-visa nationals where ultimately you don't have to have a visa. You can apply for what we call a visa waiver. And recently, in January of this year, the British government brought in what we call ETAs, Electronic Travel Authorisation. It's the equivalent of the American ESTA. Basically, you pay £16, you fill out the form, and it just gives the UK government some information about you before you can turn up. And everybody has to do that now. There are no, even if you're a non-visa national, so you don't need a visa to come to the UK, you have to have an ETA. There's no choice on that. But the non-visa nationals are allowed to come to the UK for a period of up to 6 months. Where you can be here and you can come as a tourist. You can come as what we call a genuine visitor to the United Kingdom. You are not allowed to, of course, work at all in that period. Now, they've slightly changed the rules in the fact that under the standard visitor visa, we used to have what we call a business visitor visa, and they've amalgamated the two. And they've also amalgamated the permitted paid engagement route as well. So they've all been put under the standard visa. What it means is that if you come to the UK and it's not the primary reason for you coming to the UK, but you end up having to do some work when you're here, as long as it's not the primary reason for your visit, then you can. So if you've got your laptop and you happen to be tapping away and sending emails and doing things, that has changed. The UK government will accept that. But if you're actively being sent to the UK to do a piece of work, you cannot come in on a visitor visa. You need to have a work visa. And that is absolutely critical. You are not allowed to work in the UK unless you have that a work visa. So even if it's for a very short period of time.
Let me ask you the question which I know the answer to, and you probably have answered it before. So I'm going to ask it flippantly and sarcastically. But Charles, how will the UK government find out that I'm working here if I'm on my tourist visa?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the reality is they probably won't. But what we are finding sometimes is that, if you come at border control and they start asking you some interesting questions, you're coming in, and even as a non-visa national, and you come in and they say, what are you doing here? And we have had situations where people have mentioned, I'm coming in because someone's asked me to do a bit of work for them. And that's when they're going to start drilling down saying, what are you doing? And then you might find yourself being sent back on the next plane. Look, you're right.
Yes.
How are the Home Office going to know that you've been tapping away on your laptop? Probably unlikely.
Which is why they probably have that little concession.
Yeah, correct. I mean, we live in a world now where, people jump on a plane, take their laptop, they can do things remotely. It's very difficult to actually find out. But if, let's say, the Home Office wanted, the border control wanted to stop you and say, show us your laptop, what are you, what have you been doing? Then, you could run the risk of them saying, well, you're not allowed to be doing that here. So it's not worth it. The rule is follow the rules. But if you find that you have to do a bit of ad hoc work whilst you happen to be visiting your great aunt here, well, then the reality is, under the current terms, then you can do that. But otherwise, you've got to get a work visa.
Fine. To me, as a non-immigration specialist, where I can think, well, I've got this 6-month period, my brain immediately goes to, well, why don't I just spend 6 months in the UK on a tourist visa? If I'm not going to work here, but let's say I'm a wealthy person who doesn't need to work, can't I just spend another 6 months in the UK on a tourist visa and another 6 months in the UK on a tourist visa? Is there a point at which the government will go, you're not a tourist anymore, you are just here more permanently? How does that work?
Yeah, okay. It's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it because I do get asked it, and I think there needs to be clarity on this. And I always use the US as actually an example. As a British person going to the United States of America, I get 90 days visa-free, okay? And I get 90 days in a 12-month period of time. So once I've used my 90 days in a 12-month period of time, that's it. Unless I come back on a visa, I can't. I've got to wait until the 12-month period is refreshed, and then I get another 90 days. The UK does not run the same system, okay? The UK's position is as follows. You come in as a tourist, non-visa national, on for a 6-month period of time. You must not overstay the 180 days. If you do, you're committing a crime, effectively. You're committing a criminal offence. So you must leave before once the 180 days is over. But let's take an example of somebody comes in on a visitor visa, they stay 180 days, they then disappear off to France for 24, 48 hours, and they come back to the United Kingdom and they say, oh, I'm back now. The reality is border control, technically speaking, could let you in to the UK. And if they do so, they can let you in for another 6 months. Mm-hmm. So you can technically speaking be here for another 6 months. But the risk that you run is that they may consider that you are not a genuine visitor to the UK. They may think that you are actually trying to stay here. And so, albeit every single time you leave the UK and you come back into the UK, you're refreshing your 6-month period of time. The risk is if you keep doing that, someone at border control is going to look and see, because they'll have the record of effectively you're in and out of the UK. They will look and see and say, well, hang on, you've just done 180 days here. You've gone away for a couple of days. You're now coming back in again. What are you doing here? Now, if they don't believe the reason why you're coming back in and they think you're trying to stay for another 6 months, the risk is they will say you're not a genuine a visitor and then send you out.
So plan in advance.
Correct. Yeah. I think the UK system is very generous and understanding, but if you try and abuse the system and you try and be sneaky and stall yourself another 6 months or time by just popping in and out, I think the risk is at some stage border control is going to say, no, you're not doing that.
No. So let's take that as a jumping off point to think about how you could then stay here in the UK for longer. In my mind, I've always thought about the different visa options that people have as being kind of those that relate to you and your family and those that relate to you and your business. And so you have to pick either one or the other, or whichever is the easiest one to get in under. So let's think about the family ones first. I can come to the UK. I mean, perhaps it's most simple. If I'm married to a UK citizen, I can claim a spousal visa. Or if I have family around me that have a better connection, I can often come in as part of a wider family group, can't I?
The wider family group is difficult, actually,
right,
fun enough, because you're talking about potentially a dependent visa linked to a family member. And unless there's a very good reason why you need being looked after by them, that is quite difficult. Let's look at the spouse visa, because the spouse visa is very normal. So there's a misunderstanding, I think, there's a lot of Brits actually, that ultimately, if I'm a Brit and I marry a foreign national, that because I'm British, I automatically can bring them back to the United Kingdom. Well, unfortunately, that is not the case, and I just want to be clear about that.
Sure.
What it means is that if I'm a British person and I go and marry, say, an American, I say, right, we're moving back to the United Kingdom, I have to comply with what I call the 4 pillars of the spouse visa. So first and foremost, need to show that we're in what we call a genuine and subsisting relationship.
Right.
And we've been in a genuine subsisting relationship for 2 years.
Not one of these green card marriages or these ones you like to sort of see occasionally on American TV.
No.
Yeah.
You need to be able to show that you have effectively been in a committed relationship for at least 2 years as part of it. And of course, you can come as not. You don't have to be married. You can become as partners, but then of course you have to be. You don't have the benefit of showing that you've got a marriage certificate.
Sure. So you've got to live together or some sort of evidence you're living together.
Correct. So you've got to show evidence of 2 years being together. Both of you have got to be over the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
So you both got to be adults. You need to be able to show to the Home Office that you have a home in the UK that you can bring your other half to, one which is effectively, a reasonable home to live in. So, if you're renting or you have, own a home or whatever, so you're going to be able to show that it's one which is going to, you can both properly live in it together. You're not living in a tent.
You're not a burden on the state.
No, exactly. But you've got a home, exactly. And then the really big one, the major is what we call the financial requirement. You need to, there are several options, but the normal options are employment or savings. So if you're looking at employment, the sponsor, so the British national, needs to be earning or needs to have a job which is going to be paying at least £29,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or if you don't have the employment, you need to be able to show savings of at least £88,500, which have been held in a financially regulated account, so, investment account or a bank account for at least 6 months before you make the application for the spouse visa. So it's very tough, and we get a lot of people who really struggle with this. And one of the things that I stressed this when I said it. It's the British sponsor from the employment side which needs to be earning the 29,000. I've had this and I had one recently where again with American, where the wife is British, the husband is American, the husband is earning the money, the wife is not earning the money, and they hit the wall.
Yeah, because
the wife, who's the sponsor, can't be the one. She's got to be the one who's earning the money, not the husband.
Gosh.
So we had said, well, you need to look at potentially the savings route. And of course, then they went, well, I don't just randomly have £88,500 sitting around in a savings account. So then what they said to me is, well, what happens if we sell our house? And yes, well, you can. But the problem that you have, if you sell the house, you have to show that it's been legally sold and it was yours, and you have to show all the documentation. But you then have to take the money from the sale and you have to put it in a savings account and hold it for 6 months. And then you can come in. So just because you sell your house doesn't mean you can immediately walk into the UK.
To say nothing of the tax consequences that I might want to talk to them about as well.
Absolutely.
So it's actually more restrictive than people think. I sit often quite near you, Charles, and I do hear the work that you do with clients. Am I right that in the last couple of years, the UK government has in particular cracked down quite hard on these kind of visas where you're coming as part of a wider family group, either because they're raising the financial requirements, they're dropping the ability for students to bring over family members. They're just making it harder for you to come into the UK if you are not the sponsor or the effective person yourself.
Definitely. I mean, you raise a good point. Students has been always the biggest one, and they've just completely cracked down in the last 12, 18 months. Unless you're reading a PhD, you can't bring dependents with you as a student now. It's not possible to do that. And in relation to the health and care worker visa, again, which they're looking at phasing out anyway, again, you can't. They've stopped you being able to bring dependents. The Home Office is absolutely cracking down on people bringing dependents. That's not to say, though, of course, if you're on a spouse visa, of course, you've got children and so forth. Of course, you can bring your children. You don't leave them back in, let's say, the United States.
That's
so, of course, and same with work visas. If someone's coming in on a skilled worker visa, and husband or wife, is going to join the person who's being sponsored to work in the UK, well, of course, the husband and wife can come across on a dependent visa linked to the skilled worker visa. And so can the children.
What about if I'm a non-British national, but I'm coming to the UK with UK nationals? And children, to sort of look after them because I'm looking after these children and I'm their caregiver, whether they're UK citizens or not. Again, that's probably less controversial.
I guess if you had a situation where you say you had a British husband, American wife, and the American wife had 2 children from a previous marriage, which are not the British husband, the British husband's children. They can still come across. It's more complex because effectively they need to have the authority from the husband,
Of course.
for them to come here and have the control. Actually, the wife has primary control over them, but you then have to hit certain different financial requirements. So the financial requirement goes higher. The 29,000 goes higher because you have to take in consideration an extra amounts for the two children.
So let's park the kind of the family relationship for the time being. Let's think about the person who's now thinking about their career. I want to start you on students and graduates, and then we'll go and think more about what I suspect is actually the work that you enjoy doing the most, which is the people and their businesses. Sure. But let's imagine a student, and so I'm a student. I'm coming here. Maybe I do an undergrad, maybe I do a postgrad, and then I graduate, and I then want to enter the workforce in the UK. How does student and the requirements move into graduate and the requirements into then staying in the UK thereafter? Can you talk us through that process?
Sure. So if you're on a student visa, and of course we issue probably more student visas than probably any other kind of visa, because people coming to UK schools, independent schools, or effectively coming to UK universities. So at the moment, in the current climate, if you once you've graduated, as long as you apply before you've ultimately graduated and finished your course, you can apply for what we call the graduate visa. And the graduate visa used to allow you to remain for 2 years if you weren't doing a PhD. So if you were doing a PhD, you could just stay for 3 years on the graduate visa. And recently it was 2 years. It's now been reduced down to, I believe it's to 12 months now. And so ultimately that allows you to stay and work without needing sponsorship for that period of time. The problem about it is that visa doesn't lead to any form of, it doesn't lead to settlement, and it can't be counted towards settlement. So student visas, if you've been in the UK, let's say for 4 years on a master's course, none of that time counts towards you getting permanent residence. Because and I think it's just important I explain, probably, to be at the moment, if you're on a visa which leads to settlement, which means you at the end of it you can get permanent residence, the normal position is you have to be on that visa for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if you do 5 years, get your permanent residence, then you can live and work forevermore in the UK. And if you then want to go on to get British citizenship, you can. Following certain other hurdles to jump over. But these visas, student visas and the graduate visa, don't count to any time at all towards settlement. So you really want to get off that graduate visa relatively quickly and find a sponsor in the UK which will sponsor you to work here and start the process of being on a skilled worker visa. So if you're a student here, you want to try and find sponsorship by a company in the UK, an employer in the UK, relatively quickly.
So I'll come on to that in a second. I have one of my other kind of questions I think I would ask if I was a person wanting to come to the UK and instructing you for your services, Charles, which is, what is the threshold for being a student in the UK? Do you ever get asked, look, there's this organisation and they're prepared to offer me some kind of degree or course, and I've signed up to it, and I may be a multi-billionaire, but yeah, sure, I'll sign up to be a student, of course. Oh, great, I can now stay in the UK, and this course runs for quite a long time. I'm part-time, and it's great. There's presumably a limitation or restriction on who can be a student and how long that student period can last for?
Yeah, you need to be, so effectively applying for a student visa, 17 and above, you need to be with a legitimate course provider, one which can issue what we call a Certificate of Acceptance of Studies, a CAS. You need to be able to show that you can pay for your course, and you need to be able to show that the course has actually accepted you onto that course and that you're going to be a proper student on that course. The Home Office has naturally cracked down on dodgy providers where clearly there's no course is really there and there's questionable as to what the person's doing. But if you're going to a mainstream UK university, they will all have sponsor licenses and they will all have the ability to issue a CAS. And as long as you can show that you're on that course, you've been enrolled on that course, it's a registered sponsor and you can afford your course and you're the correct age, then the reality is you can go and get a student visa. That's relatively straightforward.
Can I work in the UK either to support myself or my student visa or otherwise while I'm on a student visa, or am I also precluded from working on a student visa?
You have to be very careful. The rules are that during term time, you're restricted to effectively work to doing your studies. You can do part-time work to supplement money, but as long as that does not interfere with your studies. If it interferes with your studies, then it's an absolute no. During holiday time, then you can work full-time in the UK on a student visa, whilst you're in your holidays. But as soon as you're back to term, you must your sole focus is your studies.
I assume that was the case. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of bars and restaurants around the UK that would suddenly find themselves short of workforce.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. Exactly.
We've got a person. They've now left university, and let's say they're now going down this skilled worker route. They want to continue working in the UK. They've graduated. They've got their degree in engineering, and they want to go and be an engineer in the UK. So what they need to be looking for is to be sponsored by an organisation as their employer. So talk us through what sponsorship is, and both how someone knows that the person has that sponsorship, but also if you're the business looking to sponsor someone, how do you make sure that you have that ability as well?
Yeah. Okay. Well, sponsorship is it's a big hot topic because it's something that the Home Office is cracking down on heavily. The Home Office, and I say this to clients all the time, consider that sponsorship is a privilege, not a right. Okay? So any employer can apply to be a sponsor of foreign nationals. It doesn't mean they're going to be accepted. There's some very specific documents that that employer, that UK employer, needs to have and to be able to show to the Home Office in order to effectively get chosen to be a sponsor. But just so I'm clear, no employer in the UK can legally employ somebody on a work visa unless they have a sponsor license. It is not allowed. So, and there is a register, you can look it up. There's a register of companies in the UK which have a sponsor license, and you can actually look to see if the company that you're looking to join has a sponsor license, because you can see it on the register.
If you're looking to apply for a job and it doesn't come up, and you're blindly assuming that you'd be accepted as a sponsored worker, and then it turns out that wasn't in place, you are culpable because it's your visa that you no longer have. And
the reality is they wouldn't be able to go through any visa process, because without the sponsor license, there is no ability to get into what we call the SMS system, which is effectively a system, an online system, which you get granted access to once you get your sponsor license. And as part of that, you can then apply for what we call a certificate of sponsorship for the person you want to sponsor. And once you have the certificate of sponsorship, you can then the company can then apply for the visa for that person. So without it, you wouldn't be able to get a visa at all.
If I'm the company, how long usually, and I appreciate that any kind of question of timeline in immigration practice is very difficult, but what kind of time frame should I be looking at if I'm a business looking to put in place a sponsor license?
I always say, if you're a business which has been trading for quite a while, so you're a genuinely accomplished business, normally they will always have the documents. Most of the documents which are required are ones that can be created or ones that your accountants can effectively put together for you. Then if you apply for the priority service, you can get a decision on getting a sponsor license within 10 working days. So that's not impossible. The normal decision time on a sponsor license application is 8 weeks.
Perfect.
And if you're a small size business which really hasn't done much trading, or let's say you're a complete genuine startup, there is a risk that, yes, you could apply for priority service. You could try. There is a risk the Home Office will turn around and say, well, this is a bit more difficult. We need to look into who you are, what you're doing, and we may take the full 8 weeks to make a decision. And like you said, they say 8 weeks. There's a risk they could go beyond that. But normally 8 weeks is probably on about target, between 8 to 12 weeks, possibly.
I'm sort of inserting my question in here because I don't know whether it sits more here or at some other point in the discussion. But I know, again, because I've heard you talk about it before, one of the areas that sometimes gets asked with high net worth families or with ultra high net worth families is, well, I want to have the ability to bring someone in. I'm not a business, but I want to bring in the au pair or the nanny or the chef or the driver. What is my ability as a UK citizen to employ someone and bring over my private chef with me when I've come from the US to the UK? How much flex is there, not as me as a business to bring someone over, but me as an individual?
It's incredibly difficult. The skilled worker visa is there because it's for skilled people. And there, what we have is a list of what we call SOC codes. There's codes setting out all the different, hundreds and hundreds of different careers and different jobs and so forth. And if they're not at the skill level and skilled worker, really, they've just changed it. It went down to A level. A level was the base level. Which now the government are proposing to put it back up. It used to be at degree level, but it's now going back up to degree level. So if you're not at a degree level standard work, and possibly a chauffeur or nanny is not going to be that, then the bottom line is you will not get a visa. You will not be able to get a visa for that. There is something called a overseas domestic worker visa, which allows somebody to bring in their domestic worker for up to 6 months. But the person who ultimately is sponsoring them, bringing them in, it has to be somebody who's literally coming in for 6 months, isn't staying. So they're coming in, they're doing 6 months, the nanny's coming with them, and the nanny needs to have been with them for at least working for them for at least a year. So it can't be somebody new. And they come in, they do their 6 months and they leave. Beyond that, they wouldn't be able to stay.
So if you're a family living in New York and you're thinking of relocating to the UK, what you really want to find is Mary Poppins. You want to find a good British nanny, a good British governess who you can bring back with you.
Correct. It's those kind of jobs. Unfortunately, you've got to be looking inside the UK.
British nannyship for British nannies. Let's go to the sort of the real heart of I think what I wanted to talk to you about, which is the area where I suspect you probably end up talking the most to high net worth individuals, not just Americans, coming to the UK, which is, well, okay, I'm a wealthy person. I don't have any ancestry. I'm not a student. So what are the options that are left? What can I do? And now we're thinking about whether they have a business that they can expand into the UK, unless they are, and we'll sort of touch on later, a specifically unique individual who is a leader in their field. Let's assume they're not. We can think about maybe expanding their overseas business into the UK if they have one. Am I right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I think this is probably the kind of the key thing and the most amount of work that I do. So for those who know, back in February 2022, the British government removed the UK investor visa. So
May it rest in peace.
Yeah, we do not have one at the moment. I just want to make that clear because I get asked this question. Is there one? No, there is not. So there is no visa at all into the UK which you can sit passively on and come and live here and do nothing. It's not. There is nothing. We're coming here all to the UK on a visa now takes you to be actually doing something actively.
I think it's okay? Is it fair to say, I don't think we're getting on a soapbox to say that the time they pulled the investor visa was around the time also they decided there were probably too many people, probably in London, probably owning high net worth property, who had come from unsavory countries on investor visas, and the government decided that was not aligned with its sort of international outlook.
I can't think who you may
mentioning
mean.
No countries in particular or what was happening in the world around 2022. But yeah, that was
Yes,
kind of the rationale for getting rid of it.
Yeah, the invasion of Ukraine certainly probably sped things up.
I would imagine so, yes.
But the reality is that we don't have an investor visa anymore. There is talk of potentially something coming out in the pipeline, but that's just talk at the moment. We're all hoping that something, and we can discuss that slightly later, of the kind of mention as to what they might be thinking of. But the key routes now for somebody coming into the UK, if you're a high net worth, and if I'll go, there's 4 really, and so I'll go through each one of them. So if you're a high net worth family and you're running a business abroad, so let's say take for an American family running a business in the United States of America, and long as that business has been trading for 3 years, so not a startup, as long as it's been trading for 3 years, there is a route called the UK Expansion Worker Visa, and what that allows is for that US company to effectively apply for a temporary sponsor license by setting up what we call a footprint in the UK. So that means registering a subsidiary or a branch of their overseas company with UK Companies House, or taking out a lease or a license of the premises. And what that does is it allows them to apply for a temporary sponsor license so that they can bring somebody over to set up that subsidiary or branch of the overseas company.
Go ahead, plant the flag in the ground. We'll be behind you. We'll follow him behind.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. So I call it a stepping stone visa. It's a visa which ultimately you're hoping will lead to something else. So the way it works is this: you apply for your temporary sponsor license by putting into the UK Home Office a detailed business plan explaining why you want to expand into the UK. Now, if you're running a successful business and genuinely you've looked at the UK market, and you can explain why the UK market is the market that you want to be in, then hopefully a detailed business plan put together by clever accountants and so forth will help you on your way to showing to the Home Office why you want to come here. Now, there's a few other documents that you have to put in on, and it's quite complex, and I'm not going to go into those details. But the reality is, if you put together that business plan, then the Home Office can make a decision within it's normally 8 weeks, can take up to 12. They'll look at the business plan, they'll really scrutinise it, and they'll say, okay, you want to expand into the UK and you're going to open, let's say, a UK subsidiary here. If they grant the licence, you can send somebody over on the UK expansion worker visa. That visa lasts for 1 year. It can be extended by a further year. So you've got a maximum of 2 years on that visa. And in that time, you need to effectively get your UK company up and running. Okay, you can bring dependents over whilst you're on the UK expansion worker visa. That's absolutely fine. So it can be the owner, it can be the founder, it can be a senior member of management. It doesn't have to be the owner or founder, but it can.
But they have to be senior. They can't just be a
senior. It can't be junior. You can't send the kind of the T boy or the photocopy. It's got to be the senior management. And you can send them over. They get it up and running, and normally they'll work with their accountants. What they'll try and do is very quickly they'll try and put in place things like registering the company with HMRC for PAYE, for VAT, getting business premises, getting employers' liability insurance, and the really important thing is hiring either a British national or at least somebody who has permanent residence in the UK to run the online sponsor management system and be what we call the level 1 user.
And that can be often the thing that they strip up on, isn't it?
Well,
trying to find someone to hire.
You've got to find somebody. And look, there are recruitment companies out there, and if you're running a successful business, trying to recruit somebody into, an office manager role or an HR role, it shouldn't be that difficult. I find the biggest problem, the absolute one which people struggle with, is opening the bank account. You need to be able to open a UK corporate bank account, which
very difficult.
It's become, ultimately we've got a lot of, Colin Bristol's got a lot of contacts with banks and a lot of things, and so we can always help on that. But the reality is that is quite a laborious process. That's why you do need that probably 12 months to 2 years, because you need to get the time to get the corporate bank account up and running. But if you do all that, you hire your British person or at least your person with permanent residence in the UK, then you can elevate the license from a temporary to a full license, and then move the person off the temporary expansion worker visa onto a proper skilled worker visa, the family as well, onto their dependent visas, and then you can live and work in the UK as under your business, running your business in the UK.
Presumably, you can then apply for a sponsor license as the UK business and bring other people over?
Yes, correct. Absolutely. Well, you would elevate. When I say you elevate the license, you elevate it to a full license.
Right, okay,
and
I see what you mean. Yes, fine.
Yeah, and then you add the tier for skilled worker, and then you can bring over other people from your overseas business into the UK. Absolutely. So it's a really good way. If you're a high net worth family and you're running a successful business, it's a really good way of getting yourself set up in the UK. And so that's route number 1. Number 2 is called self-sponsorship. Ultimately, if you are, let's say, a high net worth American family and you know somebody over in the UK who you know and trust, who ultimately is either a British citizen or has permanent residence, you can basically get them to set the company up for you and ultimately apply for a sponsor license for the company and then bring you over on a skilled worker visa. Now, it cuts out all the issue of having to do the expansion worker and so on. It's faster. But the reality is, you've got to know and trust somebody, because that person's got to be a director or a full-time employee of your business.
Maybe they're a family member. Maybe it's your wife's.
You have to be very careful with that.
Okay.
You have to be very careful, because family members, yes, you can do that. The Home Office are very aware of that,
right.
And you need to inform the Home Office on a sponsor note that effectively you are bringing in family members, right. And they are going to seriously scrutinise it, because they'll go, "Well, why? What are you doing here? Are you setting up a business? Yeah. Well, are you setting up a business because you want to run a business here, or are you doing this just to get family members a visa into the UK?" So you've got to be very careful. It's not impossible, but one thing you're going to have to show if you're bringing family members over is that those family members have got the skills and experience to be inside that business, working in that business. Because, if they haven't, not going to work.
Right. So that was route 2. What was the route 3?
And the route 3, I would say, would be the innovator founder.
Yes.
So the innovator founder visa. It's effectively it's entrepreneurial. It's for people who have got an innovative business plan. and something which they think is unique to the UK market.
Let me put my client voice on, Charles, for you, because I've definitely heard you say this to people. But Charles, I've got this really innovative business. Surely that's allowed.
Well, it depends on what the endorsing body. So there's 3 endorsing bodies which basically your business plan has to go to, and they will make a decision as to whether or not they consider your business is innovative. And I had to say, I find this rather subjective, really, because I mean, what I may think is innovative, what you may think of innovative is, could be completely different. I find that the innovator founder visa is more useful for people who are in the tech world.
I was going to say, yeah.
Because I think tech is it's very hard, in the fact that, people are bringing out things the whole time, new algorithms, new AI, and so, in that situation, you're more likely to be able to say, well, I'm doing something that no one else is doing.
Yeah. And the UK is going to go, well, of course, we want you in the UK. That sounds, yes, let's have more of you in the UK, please. That's why.
Totally. But it's a tough visa, because the fact of the matter is, if you get through the endorsing process, then applying for the visa is absolutely run of the mill. That's fine. But you've got to get through the endorsement process, and you've really got to be able to show that you've got what we call an innovative, scalable and viable business. So, that you really know what you're doing. You've got an innovative business, and you're looking at this business really going somewhere and potentially even having international sales. And if you can't show that, and this is something where you really, again, need a very, very detailed business plan as to what you're doing and what, ultimately why you think this is going to fly, because otherwise it won't get through endorsement. Now, the interesting about the innovator founder visa, like the one I'm about to talk about in a minute, the global talent visa, is that if you get it right and you produce this phenomenal innovative business, you can achieve getting permanent residence as the person with the innovator founder visa within 3 years. It's a very fast track route.
Again, we want you here. We want you to stay, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So within 3 years, and there's some very tough criteria that you need to hit at year 3 to show to the Home Office that you're employing a lot of people, you've got big turnover, so if you come in on an innovator founder visa and you're lucky enough to get one, you can't sit there twiddling thumbs for 3 years. You need to be that business. You got to be hitting the ground. Yeah, you got to really hit the ground running and go for it. But if you do it, then the prize is you can achieve permanent residence within 3 years.
So,
which is fantastic.
Talk to me about global talent visas, because this is the one I probably, as an audience member to your telephone call, sometimes I enjoy the most, because you having to sit and describe to people who is globally talented, or sometimes letting people down that they aren't perhaps as globally talented as they think they are, is hard. So, what is the global talent visa, and who is eligible to come in on that visa?
Sure. Okay. Look, the global talent visa is there are 2 strands to it. Okay. There's what we call exceptional talent and exceptional promise. So let's look at exceptional talent first. Exceptional talent is what it says it is. You need to be somebody who is considered worldwide a leading person in your field of expertise.
You are a sport person, and you are a Premier League footballer, or aspiring to be a Premier League footballer.
You wouldn't use GT for sport.
Okay.
No, that's different. That would come on to what we call the Tier 2 international sports person visa.
Yes,
the GT visa covers the following fields: science, medicine, engineering, humanities, combined arts, television, cinema, theatre, music.
So you're an actor coming over, or a leading cardiographer, or some sort of leader in your field.
Absolutely, and what you need is you need 3 recommendation letters from leading people worldwide in their fields to confirm that they consider that you have exceptional talent. And then normally you have to be able to show 10 pieces of evidence which back up the recommendation letters, and also a very detailed CV setting out, basically what you've managed to achieve. There's a faster track route into it if you win certain awards. So if you get a Nobel Prize of Physics, or you've got a BAFTA or an Oscar, then you're relatively quick shoe in. But there aren't that many people around who have those incredible accolades. So if you don't, then you have to go through effectively what we call peer review. You have to go through the recommendation letters. You have to be able to show the evidence, and it's tough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, ultimately, I always say to people with an exceptional talent application, you know, with an exceptional talent application, when somebody shows you the evidence of what they've done, whether or not it's going to. Anytime I sit there with an application and I'm kind of going, don't know what they're going to say, that to me always slightly worries me, because on all the applications I've ever done, when someone's come to me and goes, I've got exceptional talent, by the way, have you seen my... And I look at it and I go, wow, you can see within minutes.
The person who is exceptionally talented probably doesn't raise the fact that they're exceptionally talented, because it's kind of just part and parcel of what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had about 2-3 years ago, I had a neurosurgeon from another country, who, when he sent through to me his CV, it was 37 pages long. I kind of got lost at about page 5 after he'd written some thesis on this, and he had, I don't know how many PhDs. And I looked at it and I thought, yes, I think we're going to struggle not to think that you've got exceptional talent. And funny enough, he was awarded his GT visa within a very, very short period of time. So it's not something, and sometimes we do have to tell people what they don't want to hear, and they come forward and say, I've got exceptional talent. You go,
well, you're going to spend money going down that route and then be disappointed. So I have to tell you now.
Yeah, you're good, but you're not. Yeah. You're good, but I don't think you're not world class. So
your application isn't exactly brain surgery, if you see what I mean.
That's for somebody who is showing that effectively they have the ability to end up becoming somebody with exceptional talent, and so it's slightly less a threshold, but ultimately, again, you need to show a lot of evidence, and you need to be able to show your letters showing that you're somebody who is likely to get, is going to get to exceptional talent very soon. And again, you can see that with certain people in the tech industry and so forth, who have they've just started up their businesses, and they've clearly been doing this and they've been doing that, and they're nearly going to get, they're nearly there, but they're not quite there yet. So that's another area as well, another option.
Fine. Let's imagine we've got our person to the UK. In the sort of 5 or so minutes we've got left, let's think about that person now wanting to stay in the UK. They've been on their visa, they've been working very dutifully, they've followed all the advice that you've recommended. You have already pointed to earlier in this conversation that the goal for someone wanting to stay in the UK is to move from their visa onto what we refer to as indefinite leave to remain, or ILR, permanent residence. And that permanent residence will eventually lead into citizenship if you keep abiding by the right criteria. So talk to me, generally speaking, about how that works from you going from visa to the application for ILR, what you have to hit, how long you have to stay on ILR, and then where citizenship comes in after that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's use an example: skilled worker visa. Sure. Okay, so I've been in the UK. I've been here for 5 years. I've been working for a company. They've sponsored me. The time has come now for me to apply for permanent residence and no longer be subject to UK immigration control. I can apply at the end of my 5-year period. You can actually normally do it 28 days before your 5-year period of continuous residence is up. Okay,
and continuous means subject to maybe some time out of the UK to a maximum amount.
Correct. So if you're only looking at getting permanent residence, then the rules relating to the amount of time you can spend outside the UK are more generous. It means you must not have been outside the UK in that 5-year period. Think of year 1 to 5. In that 5-year period, you must not have been outside the UK for more than 180 days in each 12-month rolling period of time. Okay? So that's more generous. 180 day, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, 180 days. Maximum is the amount of time that you can be outside the UK. The rule is never breach the 180 day rule. Mm-hmm. Otherwise you have a big problem. If you want to get citizenship, it's more draconian. The rule is you must not have been outside the UK for more than 450 days in aggregate over the 5-year period. Okay, so let's look at it at 90 days, 90 day, 90 day, 90 day, 90 day. Okay, but you never breach the 180 day rule, but you've got a bit more flexibility. So let's say you were out for 150 days in year 1, but you were only out for 30 days in year 2. So you can play, there's a level of effect in aggregate, but that allows you, if you stick to the 450 day rule, that allows you, once you've applied for permanent residence and achieved it, you can then go on and you then have a 12-month period of time after you've achieved permanent residence. So as soon as I've got permanent residence, the clock ticks, I've got a 12-month period of time. And in that 12-month period of time, I must not have been outside the UK for more than 90 days, strict 90 days in that 12-month period. And then I can apply to get British citizenship. So really, you could get British citizenship with everything going to plan in, 6.5 years. So you do your 5 years on your visa, you apply for permanent residence, you get granted permanent residence because you've abided with the 450-day rule. You then start your 12 months with your permanent residence. You do 12 months with your permanent residence. In that 12-month period, you do not leave the UK for more than 90 days maximum. And then at the end of that 12-month period, you can apply to naturalise and become a British citizen.
Let's say I've sat on my ILR for 10 years, and after 10 years on ILR, and I've abided by the rules of ILR, I want to apply for citizenship. Am I still bounded by that not being outside the UK for 90 days, etc. you were talking about?
Yes, the continuous residence requirement, you do need to comply with the 450-day rule. So at some stage you would have to ensure, because they'll look back. So you take it from the point of when you make the application, they look back and say, have you got the period of time where you've complied with the 450-day rule and then the 90-day rule in the 12 months before you submit the application. So I always say to people, please, as much as you can, unless you absolutely can't because you're traveling on business, please comply with the 450-day rule in the first place, because it makes it easier, because you can then get the golden prize, which is the British citizenship.
I raise it only anecdotally because my mother, former podcast star of this for our Christmas episode a few years ago, and probably listening now, Mum, how are you? Had been on ILR for a very long period of time, and she was concerned that she'd been married to my father and had ILR for many years, but if she suddenly got taken away from the UK because maybe her parent was unwell, that might suddenly limit her ability to come back into the UK on ILR. So she thought, well, hang on, I need to think about finally getting my citizenship, because then I can go and come as I please. Now, as it turns out, she took Irish citizenship because she had an Irish grandparent, and Irish citizens could live in the UK permanently as well.
Correct. Common travel area.
Yeah, common travel area. But she was concerned about what suddenly being outside the UK, being pulled away for family reasons on ILR might mean. And I think, Mum, okay, you can tell me afterwards whether I'm wrong, that was part of her reasoning for wanting to take citizenship, was because then that would give her the right to move freely between the...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the reality is being as a US citizen, she only needed you to comply with the rule relating to if you don't spend more than 2 years out. So as long as you step back in the UK for 24 hours in a 2-year period, then you're fine. So she would have actually been fine. She can stay on the island. Saying that, though, I've got a client at the moment who's was living in the UK for a very long period of time, and then left for 6 years.
Yeah,
never came back to the UK in 6 years, and then suddenly found himself in a situation where it's like, oh, I want to come back, but I used to have permanent residence. It's like, yeah, but you left for 6 years. It's gone. It's gone. Yeah. We now need a visa.
much more amusing for my mother is that she's also, of course, an EU citizen by virtue of being an Irish citizen. Which, Dad, this one's for you. I think my dad is rather annoyed because he'd quite like his EU citizenship back.
Does it help? Actually, just very quick as a final thing. Actually, we'll talk about EU citizens.
Yeah. Where are we on EU citizens?
Interestingly, I mean, of course, Brexit happened. We had the whole thing with the EU settlement scheme, European citizens having to sign up to the EU settlement scheme. That scheme closed on the 30th of June 2021. So, and we still get stragglers every so often saying, can I join? It's the reality is, unless you've got an exceptional reason now, you've had it. It's not going to happen. Yeah. But where are we? Actually, quite interesting. I've got some stats here. In December 2023, the Home Office stated that 5.7 million people had secured their rights in the UK through the EU settlement scheme. 2 million are currently with pre-settled status, and 3.7 million have got settled status. Now, if I explain what settled status means, permanent residence. Mm-hmm. For Europeans, it's permanent residence. So we've got 3.7 million Europeans living in the UK now with permanent residence, and we've got 2 million who are effectively on the road to getting permanent residence. They haven't quite got there, which means they haven't done their 5 continuous years here. So there are still 2 million people that need to apply for settled status. Now, the government stated that they were going to try and, as much as possible, make it automatic, that they would update from pre-settled to settled. Okay. And a lot of that's done if you have a national insurance number. Mm-hmm. So they can see that you're working here, and then you get update. But for those who don't, you do need to apply for settled status. Now, the government back it was in May 2024, said they had automatically extended for people on pre-settled status by 2 years their ability to apply for settled status. They've then increased that to 5 years now. So we've got a further 5 years, and that was in 2024. So that's taking us up to kind of, heading up towards the 2030. I would say that's the final time. They won't extend it. So really by the end of, this decade, if you haven't applied for your settled status, if you haven't done it, it's a kind of use it or lose it. You need to go. it's as simple as that. But I think most people will automatically, hopefully, be upgraded. But I would say to anybody with pre-settled status, you do need to keep an eye on your position, and as soon as you hit the ability to apply for a settled status, apply for it. Make sure
there's your official warning from Charles Avens.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Charles, it's been so wonderful to have you on. I do remind myself of what I said about an hour ago, or however long ago it was when this recording comes out, that brevity would be the thing we'd have to keep. But I there's a lot to be discussed, and immigration is such a fast-moving and dynamic area relative to a lot of the things that we joke about in the tax and estate planning world, which are either absolutely cutting edge or have been in place for 200 years. Immigration is such a political football that you really need to sort of stay on top of what the latest rules are. And so it's incredibly generous of you to come by and to talk everyone through it. If people want to find out more, if I want to find out more, I'll go and talk to you in the office next week. But if people want to find out more from you about what they should be thinking about when coming to the UK, how would you recommend people get in touch with you?
Ultimately, I have a LinkedIn page. All my details are on there. All my email address, my telephone number, direct number. If people want to message me from there, they can do so. They can of course naturally message the firm. And of course, if anybody comes off the back of this and asks questions, then I'm sure they can be put through to me. But I get a lot of people asking questions through LinkedIn. I get a lot of people coming through there, and they just put in my name, Charles Avens. All my details will come up, and then very, very happy for people to contact me. I'm very happy to answer questions. Absolutely, it's no problem at all.
Fantastic.
As you said, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment. There's a new white paper which has just been released by the government, so there could be significant changes coming in September. So we just got to watch this space, see what happens, and we'll just keep people up to date as the changes come through and let people know.
You're such a seasoned professional, Charles. What a cliffhanger. We will leave it there. Charles Avens, head of the immigration practice here at Collier Bristow. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And to you, the listener and the viewers, thank you for joining us as well. We will see you next time.
Aidan, thank you very much indeed. It's very kind. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today on this episode of US UK Tax Talk, and thanks again to Charles Avens for coming onto the show. Just remember, we're now on a new release schedule, each episode dropping on the first Wednesday of each month. We're also on YouTube, so you have the opportunity to watch us in video as well as listening through all your normal podcast channels. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next month.